Welcome back to the Buddhist Audio Bookshelf YouTube channel. Today, we continue our reading of Meditation by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, also known as Geoffrey DeGraff. We deeply value your support. Please like and share this audiobook to reach a wider audience, allowing more people to benefit from its wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ensuring you receive immediate notifications as we upload new content. Together, we can spread the teachings of meditation and mindfulness, fostering a community of enlightenment and inner peace. Thank you for being part of our journey to make these profound teachings accessible to all. Let's start today with reading. At the Door of the Cage. July 30, 2003. Our practice requires a lot of letting go. We prefer to think that it involves letting go of things that we don't like, while allowing us to hold on to the things we do like, but actually it requires a lot more letting go than that. Several years back I was leading a day-long discussion on the Four Noble Truths. When we got to the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, the passages we were discussing contained descriptions of nibbana, and the general consensus in the group was that they didn't like the sound of it. It seemed too alien, too foreign to be really appealing. Then we got to the fourth noble truth, and we started talking about right concentration. That sounded very appealing. Rapture and pleasure permeating the entire body. Those were things you really could get your mind around. They sounded compelling. And that's the way it is with the practice. You have to develop the fourth noble truth, the path of practice, before you can appreciate the third. You have to hold on to right concentration before you can let go into the deathless. The Buddha's strategy in teaching us to let go is to give us better and better things to hold on to. For example, he gets you to hold on to states of good concentration. Then when you turn around and look at things that would normally incite your lust, your anger, your desire or passion, you realize that they're not worth it. You'd much rather hold on to the stillness, the state of satisfaction, the state of well-being that comes with your concentration. So you burn your bridges behind you and hold on to concentration as your only true happiness in life. Only then, when the Buddha has you cornered like that, does he have you think of the drawbacks not only of the things you've already left behind, but also of the concentration you're holding to. Only when you see the drawbacks of concentration can you realize that the only alternative is the deathless. The only thing that would really appeal to you at that point is the deathless. That's when the door opens. As the texts say, the first stage in insight is to focus on the drawbacks of anything that's fabricated. The next stage is for the mind to incline to the deathless. Normally the mind will not incline to the deathless unless it feels that that's the only way out. Otherwise it's always going to find some other place to go, some other corner to hide in. So you need to remember that the teachings on, say, the three characteristics inconstancy, stress, and not self are part of a course of training, and that the different teachings make sense only in particular stages of the training. Only when you're in the right stage for a particular teaching will it do its intended work. Ordinarily, we'd like to leapfrog over the concentration to get to the discernment, because we're very busy people, after all. We've got a lot to do in our lives, so we want to get to the main point of this Buddhism thing, and then go on to something else. But that's not how the practice works. You have to put your mind in particular states, you have to get attached to particular states before the teachings can function in the way they're supposed to. If you think about the inconstancy, stress, and not selfness of things you're not attached to, it doesn't really make an impact. Or if you tell yourself that everything is inconstant, stressful, and not self before the mind has a safe place to settle down, those thoughts can be really unsettling and disorienting. Only when you're in a relatively stable place mentally, and ready to look for a way out from even the subtle instability there, will those thoughts provide the way out. Years back I was flying on an airplane where they showed the movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I didn't have the soundtrack to go by, but even without paying much attention, I found the story pretty easy to figure out. The hero had a miserable family life, and so when the opportunity came to step onto that humongous flying saucer and go off who knows where, he was willing to go. Now, if he had had a happy family life, A satisfactory family life, he wouldn't have gone. He would have been happy to stay home, and the prospect of going off with these weird creatures from outer space would have been too daunting. But the fact that his life was so miserable made him willing to take the leap. In that case, the leap was pretty strange. And, fortunately, the Buddha doesn't ask us to be miserable before we leap to Nibbana, but he does recommend that we develop a sense of disenchantment nibbida, and that we do it skillfully. He teaches us to get attached to more and more refined states of well-being in the mind, and to become disenchanted with everything else. It's like climbing a ladder. To climb up the rungs of the ladder, you already have to be holding on to a higher rung before you can let go of a lower one. Finally, when you get to the top of the ladder, when there's nothing higher to hold on to, nowhere else to go, that's when you get off onto the roof or wherever you're headed. That's when you can totally let go. In the meantime, you've got to hold on. The same principle holds true in the practice. You let go of lower attachments only when you've got something higher to hold on to. So when you're practicing concentration, don't be afraid of being attached to it. In fact, you should get attached here. That's part of the whole dynamic of the practice. Allow yourself to be attached to the breath, get to play with the breath, make the breath a really comfortable, good place to stay. As the breath gets more refined, you find that the mind goes through more refined stages. The two help each other along. The greater the refinement of the mind, the more refined the breath, and vice versa, back and forth. And you find that your concentration does go through clearly discernible levels. But again, don't be afraid of getting attached to them. The whole point is to want to be there, to want to develop the mastery that allows you to bring the mind to those levels whenever you need them, and to stay centered in them as long as you like. This is why the Buddha, unlike a lot of modern teachers, never warned his students against getting attached to jhana. In fact, his instructions when he sent them off to meditate were always very clear. Go do jhana. And he wanted them to master it. Ajahn Fuang once said, you have to be crazy about the meditation in order to be really good at it. In the course of the day, whatever spare minute you can find to keep your mind on the breath, you want your mind to head there, again and again. It's almost as if you were addicted to it. They say that when alcoholics go into a house, one of the first things they pick up on is where the alcohol is kept. They're very conscious of that. Their minds incline in that direction, so that without even thinking they can detect the signs. Well, you want to be a breath-aholic. Wherever there's breath, you want your mind to head there. Of course, you find that it's everywhere if you're really interested, if you really want to pursue it. Again, it doesn't matter that you're attached to it. There are ways of ultimately prying you loose from that attachment. In the meantime, it's a good place to be attached. States of concentration, states of well-being in the mind that don't have to depend on circumstances outside. That's a lot better than being attached to the sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and ideas we're normally attached to. So allow yourself to cling here. It's like the cages where they put birds. If you happen to open the door while the bird is clinging to the door, the bird can get out. That's what these states of concentration are. They're doors to the deathless. When we say that the Buddha has you cornered, he's got you cornered right here at the door. If you hang on here, you'll eventually be able to open the latch and you'll be free. But if you're not here, if you're overhanging on the walls, then it's very easy for the person opening the cage to keep you in. Clinging to the walls doesn't get you free. In other words, you might think that you'd like to put an end to all your suffering, but if you're not really in the right place, it's not a door. You keep banging your head against the walls of the cage. But if you learn to hold on to these states of concentration, the time will come when they turn into doors. You'll develop a sense of dispassion not only for ordinary pleasures, but also for the peace you gain from states of concentration. You'll begin to see that no matter how good you are at the concentration, there will always be change, inconstancy in that concentration. And the time will come when the mind is simply fed up with that. It's had enough. That's nibbida, disenchantment. You're no longer enchanted with the concentration. You use it, but it doesn't have the same pull it had before. You want something better. That's when the mind can really incline to the deathless. As I told the people in that discussion group, the third noble truth may not sound attractive now, but as you get into the fourth noble truth and develop these states of concentration, you realize that the third noble truth really is better. It may not sound better in words, but when you're disenchanted with the fourth noble truth, you see that the third truth is the only direction where true happiness lies. Ultimately, the mind will lean there, will incline itself there, because it's in a position to appreciate it for what it is. So if you want to know what the Buddha was talking about and see if it really is something better than what we're experiencing now, this is what you work at. These stages of concentration. Direct the mind to the breath, evaluating the breath, really coming to appreciate what it is to be settled down, really coming to appreciate the state of stillness, and not chasing after things that keep running away from you through your senses. Come to appreciate the sense of stillness you can gain with the breath. When you appreciate this, you'll be in a position to appreciate things that are even better, so that when you incline to something better, you find that you're actually right at the door of the cage. You can fly. Close to the heart. December 1st, 2003. Okay, time to practice. There are times when talk about practice is helpful. And times when it gets in the way. The best way to solve that problem is simply to do the practice. When you talk about the practice, you can start getting lost in abstract space. You forget that the whole purpose of the Dhamma is to point into our hearts. The big issues that we carry around inside us are fears, our sufferings, our whole sense of what life is all about. To the extent that talking about the practice helps to get perspective on these things, then it's useful. But the talk has to be part of a larger doing something about those problems. Sometimes the doing may seem strange. Here we are sitting, watching our breath. What does that do? It brings us close to the heart, very close to our minds. Of all the things we can know outside of our minds, the breath is the closest. As we're one-on-one with the breath, that changes our perspective on things. We let go of the outside distractions and ultimately turn our attention to the other part of the one-on-one, which is the mind aware of what's going on in here. Back when I was first ordained, Ajahn Fuang had me memorize the divine mantra, which, I must admit, struck me as kind of strange, as it centered on the 6 elements, a way of looking at things that felt very foreign. He had me chant it every evening. I was living alone up on the hill in Rayong, and would chant the divine mantra every evening just after dusk. After doing this for a while, it became less of a weird aspect of Thai Buddhism and more of a friend as I sat there through the night, all by myself. Finally, one evening it really hit me. I was going through the 6 elements, and when I finally got to the chant on consciousness, I realized that I wasn't chanting about some foreign, abstract idea of consciousness. I was chanting about my own awareness, my own mind, my own heart, right here, right now. I felt as if a huge block of ice inside me just shattered. I was able to open up and realize that the meditation wasn't some strange foreign thing I was doing to myself. I hadn't consciously thought that it was, but subconsciously, deep down inside, there was a feeling that it was alien, something from another culture. That night it became mine. My awareness of my mind, my awareness of things really deep inside. The Dhamma was no longer a foreign mold that I was trying to impose on the mind. It became a message pointing to my deepest awareness. And I became aware of a real tenderness deep down, a tenderness not in the sense of being nice or fuzzy, but in the sense of having been wounded, of needing some help. There was a need for some healing there, and the meditation was what it needed. I wouldn't say that I hadn't gained anything from the practice up to that point, but the quality of what I gained changed that night. This is what we're working on as we're practicing. The term padapit in Thai means to practice, as when we're practicing the Dhamma, but it also means to look after somebody. Sometimes the Thai Ajahns say, we're not here to padapit the Buddha's teachings, we're here to padapit our own minds. To look after our own minds, our own hearts. So although the words may seem foreign and the process of meditation mechanical, you're focusing on the breath, You're dealing with the mechanics of the breathing, how the breathing relates to the pains in the body. Ultimately, these things start getting closer and closer to your heart. As you learn to treat your heart with more sensitivity using the breath, using the understanding you gain from the Dhamma, after a while the heart begins to open up. It opens up and allows you to heal it. Without that opening up, there's going to be a resistance. Now, this opening may happen suddenly or gradually, but the important point is that as you get to know the breath, get close to the breath, you're also getting closer and closer to your own mind, closer to the more sensitive parts of your mind. As you deal with the breath more precisely, with more sensitivity, you find that the mind is finally willing to open up to itself. Prior to that point, it was used to being abused and misused, and so it shut itself in, shut itself up, even against you. One part of the mind shut up against another part, and so the healing couldn't take place. Your conscious awareness has to learn to be a healing awareness, so that the parts of the mind that need to be healed will be willing to open up. So an important part of the practice is sensitivity. Start out by getting very sensitive to the breath. Get to know how it feels in the different parts of the body, how different rhythms of breathing feel. It's not so much that you want to become a breath mechanic, although that's one of the side benefits. It's more that you try to develop your sensitivity to the present moment, your sensitivity to the least little bit of stress, the least little bit of harshness you're adding unnecessarily to the present moment. You gain more finesse with smoothing it out, evaporating it, dissolving it away. You begin to see that even the simple process of breathing can be done well or poorly. If you pay attention to it, it can be done well. That way, the simple fact that you've got a breath becomes more than just a means for keeping the body alive. It can actually be used to heal the body, to deal with different types of pain in the body. At the same time, it gets more and more healing for the mind. As you become more sensitive to precisely how you approach the present moment, how you deal with the present moment, all those parts of the mind that shut themselves off because they didn't want to be mistreated, seem to realize instinctively that there's better treatment in the offing. Your conscious awareness is more of a healing awareness than it was before. This allows the rest of your awareness to begin opening up. Those parts of the body that you often have trouble accessing even with the breath. There comes a time where your sensitivity reaches the point where they begin to open up, too. You may have noticed, when you really look at your inner sense of the body, that certain parts seem to be missing. There's a holding in, a tension that blocks things off. But as your sensitivity to the breath begins to get more and more subtle, the blockages dissolve, and you realize that what seemed to be a physical blockage had its mental side as well. It's opening up now that you have the physical and mental tools to deal with it, along with the sensitivity to use those tools well. So, your sensitivity to the present moment is a very important part of developing concentration, developing insight, and dealing with the whole problem of suffering, the burdens that the mind carries around. It gives you the tools you need to deal with all the unskillful mental states that seem to get lodged in the mind and do their damage in both body and mind, and yet that we're often afraid to deal with. When you're given the tools of not only the breath but also other perspectives of the Dhamma, and this is why talking about the Dhamma can be helpful at times, to gain a clear and precise sense of your tools, then you're ready to handle them. When I was staying with Ajahn Fuang, the lessons didn't just come from the meditation technique. They also came from being around him, getting his perspective on things. I found myself learning a lot just by living with someone from a totally different background. I'd come up with a problem and mention it to him, and he'd look at me as though I'd come from the other side of the world. Which, of course, I had. My way of looking at the problem seemed very natural to me, but to him it was extremely strange. Learning to see the strangeness of some of my problems was a useful exercise in getting outside of the problems for a while, sometimes for good. So, if our discussions help in that way, then they're useful discussions. They can give us a new perspective on our problems. The real work, though, is something that's done inside, and often it's hardly even verbal at all. This is why the breath is such a good way of getting around A lot of our internal blockages. Instead of attacking the problem verbally, you come at it from the nonverbal side, the energy in the body becoming sensitive to the side that gets around the mind's automatic nonverbal defenses. These patterns of blockage in the mind are what ignorance is all about. Hiding behind that ignorance are all the causes of suffering. This is one of the scary parts of being born into any realm, especially the human realm and the realms below that. As you come into this life, you immediately meet with suffering. Wham! Immediately, and there's nobody to explain it to you. You're facing it head on. Other people can comfort you, but they can't show you how to deal with it. So the mind comes up with all sorts of jerry-rigged approaches, improvised approaches, to keep the suffering at bay. Then, even after we learn language, we carry those pre-verbal approaches toward suffering into our adult lives without realizing it. Often those approaches involve blocking, denial, and it's not just a mental blocking. It's a physical blocking as well. So, as we're working with the breath and getting around some of these blockages, don't be surprised when the sleeping dogs, the things that seem to be lying very peacefully in the mind, suddenly get stirred up. That's because the barrier behind which they were hiding has suddenly dissolved away. When that happens, you can use the sensitivity you've developed in the meditation, along with the understanding of the Dhamma you've developed by reading and listening, gaining a perspective on the whole issue of suffering and the end of suffering, and apply them directly to your own immediate sufferings. The Buddha wasn't talking about suffering in the abstract, he was talking about the sufferings lodged right here in each person's heart, right here in your heart, right now. And the tools he offered are meant to come here into the heart, to the particular sufferings in the heart, where they can make all the difference. The Sublime Attitudes. July 2003. The Buddha's teachings on skillful qualities of mind come in clusters. 5 this, 7 that. Even the one quality that's always appropriate, mindfulness, is always taught in the context of clusters. To begin with, it's paired with alertness. Mindfulness means keeping something in mind, as when we keep reminding ourselves to stay with the breath as we meditate. Alertness means noticing what's going on, being alert to what you do, and to the results of what you're doing. For mindfulness to be effective in training the mind, it always has to be paired with alertness. And both of them have to play a role in larger clusters as well. They're part of the 5 strengths, the 7 factors of awakening, and the Noble Eightfold Path. The reason the Buddha teaches skillful qualities in clusters is because unskillful qualities come in clusters, too. The 3 roots of unskillfulness, greed, aversion, and delusion, can branch out into 5 hindrances, 7 obsessions, 10 fetters, 108 forms of craving. They grow exponentially. No one skillful quality can take them all on. Each skillful quality has to be strengthened by others to be effective, to play its part in the training of the whole mind. At the same time, each has to be balanced by others to make sure it doesn't go overboard and end up as a tool for the opposing forces. This is why the Buddha left teachings like the 4 bases of success, the 7 factors for awakening, and the 4 sublime attitudes. Armies of skillful qualities to do battle with the armies of Mara. When you see the various lists placed down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, it gives the impression that you start with one skillful quality and then drop it to move on to the next. Actually, the process is more a question of gathering all the qualities together and then leaning in the direction of one or another as is appropriate, so that the mind can maintain its balance. This is the principle that applies to the sublime attitudes. Immeasurable goodwill, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable appreciation, and immeasurable equanimity. We start out with goodwill not because it's the least advanced of the qualities, but because it's the most essential, the most basic. On top of that, you build the others: compassion, appreciation or sympathetic joy, and finally equanimity. A balanced mind is one that knows when to emphasize which of the 4. It's not that you abandon number 1 to move to number 2 or number 4, you're trying to keep all 4 of them on hand so that you can use whichever one is appropriate for the occasion. Goodwill lies at the basis of everything. In fact, you could say that it lies at the basis of the whole practice. If we didn't have goodwill for ourselves and the people around us, the Four Noble Truths wouldn't make any sense as an important teaching. It's because we would like to see suffering end, not only for ourselves but for the people around us, that we want to follow the path to the end of suffering. We're concerned to find out what suffering is, how we can abandon its causes and help to realize its cessation. So goodwill is where everything starts. Think about it. Why would you want anyone else to suffer? You might think about the evil or cruel things they've done in the past, but even then, why would you want them to suffer? To learn a lesson? Well, they're going to learn their lesson because the principle of karma is going to take care of that. That's why the teaching on equanimity is there, so you don't have to go out and be God's vengeful sword to make sure that everyone gets their just punishments. Your only job is to make sure there are no limits on your goodwill. When people have done horrible things, you don't have to like them, you don't have to condone their behavior. That's not what goodwill means. Goodwill means that you don't wish anyone harm. If they're doing horrible things, you have every right to stop them if you can. After all, in doing horrible things, they're creating bad karma, more suffering for themselves. Just make sure that you don't harm them in trying to stop them. So try to make your goodwill limitless, or as the texts say, immeasurable. Take this as a challenge. When you spread thoughts of goodwill, test to see where the limits are. Don't just pretend that your goodwill is immeasurable. Everyone's goodwill starts out with limits. What are the limits of yours? After spreading goodwill to people you already feel it for your friends, your family, start spreading it to people for whom you don't spontaneously feel it. Does your heart object when you try spreading goodwill to people you dislike? Stop and ask it. Why? What would you gain from seeing them suffer? Look at the little voice inside that resents their happiness. Is that a voice you want to identify with? Can you drop that attitude? This is where the practice of developing goodwill really makes a difference in the mind. When it forces you to challenge any smallness or narrowness in your heart. If you think of goodwill as a billowing pink cloud of cotton candy, covering the world in all directions, what you're really doing is covering up your actual attitudes, which is of no help at all in gaining insight into the mind. Goodwill is meant as a challenge, as a way of searching out and working through your small-hearted attitudes one by one, so that you can examine them, uproot them, and really let them go. Only when you work through the particulars like this can goodwill become more and more limitless. That's when your compassion can become limitless as well. If you feel goodwill for people, then when they're suffering the ill effects of their bad karma, you can't help but have compassion for them. You want them not only to stop experiencing whatever pain or suffering they're undergoing at the time, but also to stop doing whatever's going to cause them to continue to suffer. This is an important part of compassion. It's not simply a soft spot in your heart for people who are suffering. It also means trying to find some way to help them to stop doing the things that are causing them to suffer to begin with. When you can help them, you appreciate their happiness. You feel sympathy for the happiness they encounter. Even in cases where people are experiencing happiness that has nothing to do with you at all, you appreciate the fact that they're experiencing the results of their past good actions or present good actions. You don't resent their happiness. Even if you're in a contest and they come in first and you come in second and you felt that you really deserve to come in first, this is where you have to practice empathetic joy. There's a larger framework for things than the one you're probably aware of. Notice in all these cases that there comes a point where you have to leave things for what they are. Cases where you want to help someone and you can't, or you would rather see yourself gain the happiness that somebody else has. This is where you have to develop equanimity. Notice that the teaching on equanimity is a reflection on the principle of karma. Of the 4 chants we have for the sublime attitudes, it's the only one that's simply a statement of fact. The others say, "May all beings be happy. May they be free from stress and pain. May they not be deprived of the good fortune they're experiencing." The first 3 are wishes, attitudes, things you would like to see happen. May. The 4th one is simply a reflection on the way things are. All living beings are the owners of their actions, heir to their actions. Whatever they do, for good or for evil, to that will they fall heir. This reflection actually turns up in lots of different contexts. In the 5 reflections, the reflection on karma is the one that gives hope. You realize that you're in charge of your actions. You're not simply a victim of fate or of the stars or of some other being acting through you. You're the one who's making the choices. That's what gives you hope. But it's hope coupled with heedfulness. You've got the power to do good with your actions, but also the power to cause harm. The principle of karma is a double-edged sword. If you're not careful, you can use it to cut your own throat. This is why the Buddha recommends reflecting on the principle of karma as a way of inspiring heedfulness. Taken a little further, the universality of the principle of karma is a reflection for developing equanimity both toward yourself and toward other people. In other words, you come across incidents in your life where you can't gain the happiness you'd like. There's a karmic block there. So you learn to accept it with equanimity. That doesn't mean that you give up and become totally passive and indifferent. You look for the areas where your actions can make a difference. Don't waste your time and energy butting your head against the wall in areas where you can't make any change. Focus on the areas where you can. So equanimity is not hopelessness, it's not passive indifference. It's there to redirect your energies in the proper direction, to the areas where you can act for your own well-being and for the well-being of others. The reflections on karma are also used as a basis for developing wisdom and insight. They form the background for all the teachings on discernment. The central insight of the Buddha's awakening was that pain and pleasure come from your actions. There are actions that bring pain, actions that bring pleasure, actions that bring both, and then special actions that put an end to action, an end to suffering, and bring total happiness. That's the essence of the Buddha's discernment. So it's an interesting combination. Equanimity, hope, heedfulness, discernment. These things all go together. They hover around that same reflection. I am the owner of my actions. All beings are the owners of their actions. In other words, all beings are responsible for what they do. Ajahn Suwat once gave a Dhamma talk on this reflection, focusing on the difference between the Anatta teaching and this one statement. Form, feeling, perceptions, thought constructs, consciousness. These are not self. But we are the owners of our actions. Think about that, he said. In other words, don't latch on to the results of your actions, latch on to the fact that you're making the decisions right now, all the time. Once a decision has been made, it's been put into a larger circle of cause and effect beyond your control. But you do have a chance to make a decision again the next moment, and the next moment, and then the next. Focus on that. Don't get caught up in the results of past actions. Focus on what you can do now to make the present action skillful. That's the focus of the teaching. We're the owners of our actions. We're the heir to our actions. We're going to be receiving the results of these actions. So act in a way whose results you'd like to receive. Be concerned about that. That's what's meant by the Pali word, atapa. It can be translated either as fear of the results of your actions or concern for the results of your actions. However you translate it, it means that you're not apathetic. You know that whatever you do is going to bear results. Here again the quality of discernment comes in. There are lots of things we like to do that will give bad results, and things we don't like to do that will give good results. The Buddha said the measure of whether we're a fool or a wise person lies in how we handle situations like that. In other words, this is where the quality of discernment really shows its worth. You can talk about discernment, you can describe the 3 characteristics, the 5 khandhas, the 6 sense spheres, dependent co-arising, emptiness, all these wonderful concepts. You can talk about them, but if they can't help you make the right decision when you're faced with a hard decision, your discernment's useless. Useful discernment is the type that enables you to talk yourself out of doing things you would like to do, but that you know would give bad results, or to talk yourself into doing things you don't like to do, but would give good results. That's where discernment shows its stuff. We're born of our actions. Our actions are the source of everything we experience. If you want experiences to be good, focus on the source. If you don't like the kind of experiences you're having, turn back and focus again on the source. It's constantly right here in the present moment. The Buddha's teachings on time are interesting in that even though they do talk about time, they don't talk about a beginning point in time. The beginning point for your experience is right here in the present moment. It all comes springing out of right here. So instead of trying trace things back to first causes someplace way back in the past, the Buddha has you look for first causes right here and right now. Dig down deep inside into the area of the mind where intention and attention and perception play against each other, for that's the point from which all things are born. We're related through our actions. The connections we have in life with different people are created by our actions. Things that we've done together with other people or to other people or for other people. These create the connections that we have with the people around us. Interconnectedness is a very popular teaching in Buddhism, especially nowadays, but it's funny that people like to talk about interconnectedness without the teaching on karma. They turn to dependent co-arising as a model for interconnectedness, this web of connections where one factor can't exist without a whole lot of other factors, but they neglect to realize that dependent co-arising is a teaching on how ignorance is connected with suffering, how craving is connected with suffering. It's the kind of connectedness you want to cut, not the kind you want to celebrate. Connectedness through karma can go either way. The connections can be good, or they can be bad. So you want to foster the good ones. And again, where do you look? You look at what you're doing right here and right now. How are you behaving with other people? How are you treating them? These create the relationships you're going to be able to enjoy, or you're going to be stuck with, now and on into the future. So choose your actions carefully. We have actions as our arbitrator. Our actions decide our lives. In other words, there's no judge up there someplace in the sky sitting on a big throne passing judgment on us. We're passing judgment on what kind of life we want to have by the way we act, which is both empowering and also a little scary. Think of how many times you've acted on unskillful motives. Think of the unskillful motives you still have lurking around in your mind that could form the basis for future unskillful actions. Think hard about that. It means there's work to be done, not just to escape unskillful actions, but also to foster skillful ones. This is where the hope comes in. Even though we may be suffering in our lives, there's a way out through our own actions. We don't have to sit around waiting for somebody else to come and save us. We're not victims of fate. We can make the choices, we can order our priorities, so that we can reshape our lives in a positive direction through our thoughts, words, and deeds. This is why we meditate, because meditation creates good qualities, skillful qualities in the mind. Mindfulness, alertness, concentration, discernment, persistence, truthfulness, perseverance. As we work at these qualities, as we put them into action, they get strengthened and become more and more the wise arbitrators of our lives, pointing our lives in the direction we really want to go. Then the final reflection builds on that. Whatever we do for good or for evil, to that will we fall heir. This is a reminder to be heedful, that we really want to act on our good impulses, our skillful intentions. We want to develop the qualities in our minds that will foster these skillful intentions, because these are the things that really make a difference. These teachings foster equanimity in reminding us to be equanimous toward our past actions, toward the results from past actions. Certain things we can't change because they've already been done. We can't turn back the clock. But the teachings foster hope in that we can make a difference in what we're doing right here and right now. There's that opening for us to design our lives, to point them in a better direction. In that balance among equanimity, heedfulness, and hope, learning how to make proper use of this principle of karma. That's where the discernment comes in. The teachings on karma have gotten a bad rap, largely because they've been mangled, turned into a simplistic caricature. Either fatalistic or tit for tat. But if you understand the complexity and also the purpose of the teaching, you begin to realize that it's not what we thought it was. It's not an excuse to justify the suffering that people are going through or for or being indifferent to that suffering. When you really understand the workings of karma, you see other people's suffering as an opportunity to help them. You don't know how much longer their karma for suffering is going to last. Wouldn't it be a good thing if you could be the agent to help bring their suffering to an end? Put yourself in their place. Wouldn't you like to have somebody come and help? And someday you may actually be in their place too. After all, as the Buddha said, you've already been there before, and if you don't get out of the cycle of rebirth, you'll probably be there again. Karma is not a teaching meant to make us feel superior to other people. You never know. Maybe the results of their past bad karma are simply coming faster than the results of your past bad karma, and you may someday be in a similar place to where they are or even worse. So you can't be complacent. And the teaching on karma is not designed to make you complacent. If anything, just the opposite. It's meant to make you uncomplacent. I once read someone saying that September 11th burst his complacent Buddhist bubble. Well, that's an oxymoron. Complacent Buddhist. The whole purpose in following the Dhamma is that it teaches you not to be complacent. As long as there's suffering in your heart, there's work to be done. So, on the one hand, the principle of karma makes you heedful, reminding you that you've got work to do. But it also means that there's a way to work with suffering, so that you can go beyond it. That's where the hope lies. If you understand how to use the teaching on karma, you see how really useful it is, how relevant it is to the meditation we're doing right now. The prime factor you want to dig down and find in your meditation is just that. The karma, the factor of intention. Watch to see how it moves. See how you can make it more skillful. See how you can perfect that factor so that it takes you not only into more pleasant places in space and time, but also when you get really skillful outside of space and time, to the end of karma, to the point where there's no more work to be done. That's one of the descriptions of an arahant. Kadam Karanyam, someone who's done the task, done what had to be done. The burden is laid down. Understanding the principle of karma and using it the right way is what makes all that possible. Basics. September 10, 2003. The first step when you meditate is to get your body into position. Your right leg on top of your left, your hands in your lap, your right hand on top of your left. Sit up straight, look straight ahead of you, and then close your eyes. That's the body in position. The next step is to get the mind in position. Start with thoughts of goodwill, because that's why we're here. Goodwill is the wish for happiness, both for your own happiness and for the happiness of everybody else. This is what we're working on as we meditate. We're taking that wish and we're working on it, looking for a way to bring true happiness to ourselves and to the people around us. Spread thoughts of goodwill first to yourself, and then out in ever-widening circles to people who are close to your heart, people you know well and like. People you're more neutral about, and even people you don't like. Don't let there be any limitation on your goodwill, because that's a limitation on your own mind, on your own happiness. At the same time, think about it. If everyone in the world could find true happiness, the world would be a much better place. No one would have any reason to harm anyone else. With that thought, spread thoughts of goodwill to people you don't even know, and not just people. All living beings of all kinds, east, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness. The next step is to bring your awareness back to the present moment. What have you got here? You've got the body sitting here breathing, and you've got the mind thinking and aware. So bring all those things together. Think about the breath and then be alert to the breath. What's the breath doing right now? Is it coming in? Is it going out? Where do you sense it coming in? Where do you sense it going out? For the time being, put aside any preconceived notions you may have about where the breath comes in and where it goes out. Just notice how it actually feels. Because breathing is not just air coming in and out of the lungs, it's the whole process, the whole energy flow by which the body brings the air in and expels it. And that's not just a matter of the nose and lungs. The entire nervous system can be involved. Different parts of the body expand and contract to bring in the air. That's all counted as part of the breathing process. So wherever you're most aware of the breathing process, focus your attention there. Try to make that spot comfortable. You can do this by adjusting the length of the breath, the width, the depth of the breath, whether it's fast or slow, heavy or light, whatever ways you have of adjusting the rhythm and texture of the breath, so that your sensation of the breathing feels good. That's getting the mind in position. Now the problem with both the mind and the body in position is how to keep them there. It's not that difficult to get them into position, but to keep them there, that takes effort. And particularly the mind, because the mind is so used to running around. The body can sit here perfectly still, yet in the course of 5 minutes the mind could have gone around the world many times. So this is the point you have to focus on most. In fact, all the real issues are in the mind. Even when there's pain in the body itself doesn't really object to the pain, it doesn't mind. The mind is what gets upset by the pain. So you have to work mainly with the mind here. If it wanders off, just bring it right back. If it wanders off again, bring it back again. Try not to get frustrated with it, try not to get discouraged. It's used to wandering, so you have to accept it as normal that the mind is going to wander. Your duty right now is to catch it as quickly as you can, and to bring it back without a lot of recrimination, just gently, but firmly, bring it back to the breath. And let the breath be as comfortable as possible. The more comfortable it is, the less likely the mind will be to wander off. In fact, if you get the breath really comfortable, it becomes really absorbing. Explore where in the body you feel the different parts of the breathing sensations, the breathing process. Which parts of the body feel tense? If you want, you can survey the whole body, starting from the top of the head on down, or starting at the navel and going up the front of the body, then down the back and out the legs, and beginning again at the back of the neck to go out the arms. Notice how the different parts of the body are or are not involved in the breathing process. Notice where you feel tension related to the breath. If you feel any tension anywhere, let it relax, let it dissolve away, so that no new tension builds up with the in-breath, and you don't hang on to any tension with the out. This way you make the breathing a lot more interesting. Then choose whichever part of the body you find congenial, and settle down there. As for pains, at this stage of the game, you don't have to focus on them. If there's a pain in the leg, just let it be in the leg. You don't have to be down there in the leg with it. You can stay in any other part of the body where the breathing feels comfortable, that's your choice. And be careful not to tense up around the pain. Remember that the breath is a whole body process. When the breathing is comfortable, the breath energy can go through all the nerves and right through any pain there may be, so that you don't compound the pain by tensing up around it. Try to develop a sense of wanting to be here, of liking to be here. Try to make the breath your friend. Often, when you're meditating and things don't seem to be going well, the object of your meditation seems to become your adversary. It's the hardest thing to focus on, and it seems to keep wanting to slip away. But that's not the case at all. That's your own misperception. If you make friends with the breath, it's a lot easier to stay here. Being friends means, first, trying to sense as precisely as possible what it really feels like, as opposed to your preconceived notions of what it should feel like or where you should feel it. In other words, listen to the breath. And then, second, allow the breath to get more comfortable. These are basic principles in establishing any kind of friendship. Listen to the other person, allow the other person to feel at ease and at home, and soon the other person will start opening up. The same with the breath. The breath energy in the body has lots to offer. On the physical side, it can relieve a lot of stress, a lot of diseases associated with stress. On the mental side, it can create a sense of ease and belonging here in the present moment, so that you enjoy being right here, just breathing in and breathing out. When you get on more friendly terms with the breath, and the breath becomes your friend, then you're more inclined to want to stay, to see what you can learn from the breath. That's the first step in having the meditation go well. There are actually 4 steps altogether, although maybe it's better not to think of them as steps. There are 4 component factors in the mental attitude you should bring to the meditation to make it go well. They're called bases of success. The first one is simply the desire to do the meditation, wanting to do it, being inclined to do it. If you find that your mind isn't inclined, step back and reason with it. Think of the importance of training the mind. Here it is, the major factor in your life, and if it's untrained, it's like giving your car over to a wild crazy person to drive. You have no idea where the crazy person is going to take that car, whether he's going to run off the road and into somebody, because you have no control over him. It's the same with your mind, the mind that shapes your life. If you have no control over it, you don't know where it's going to take you. So as we're meditating, we're trying to develop a measure of control. Not the sort of control freaks, but the control of someone who's intelligent in knowing how to administer and manage things, so that the mind feels happy to do what really should be done. That requires mindfulness, it requires alertness. And those are precisely the qualities we're developing as we meditate. The mind is the chief producer of all the happiness and suffering we experience in the world. That's why, when the Buddha gave his first sermon, started out with the issue of suffering. That, he said, is the big problem in life. And it's to be solved right here, in the mind in the present moment, because the suffering isn't something coming from outside. The real problem in life is the suffering that comes from craving. And you can't work on craving until you're really mindful and alert, and have the steady concentration that allows you to look at it calmly, to see it in action. So those are the qualities we're developing as we meditate. Mindfulness, alertness, concentration, the ability to see things clearly as the mind grows more still. So even though we haven't quite gotten there yet in our meditation, at least we're working in that direction. And the more you sense the importance of these qualities, the more you strengthen your desire to meditate. Once that desire is in place, the next step is just to stick with it. Persistence is the second base of success. Just keep at your task. If the mind slips off, bring it back. If it slips off again, just bring it back again. If it slips off 10 times, 100 times, bring it back 10 times, 100 times. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Remember that this is a task that nobody else can do for you. We suffer in life because of our own lack of skill in dealing with sights and sounds and smells and tastes and ideas that come our way. And because it's our own lack of skill, we're the ones who have to overcome that lack by developing more skillfulness in how we manage our minds. If we don't do it, nobody can do it for us. And if we don't do it now, when is it going to get done? Are you going to wait until you're older? That doesn't help. On the one hand, even if you do live to a ripe old age, the mind gets more and more difficult to train the older you get. And then of course there's the question of whether or not you're going to live that long. You've got the opportunity to meditate now, so go ahead and do it. Make the most of it each moment you have the chance. That's persistence. The third base of success is intentness. You really focus on what you're doing. You give it your full attention. In the case of the breath, this means noticing when it's too long, when it's too short, when it's too heavy, when it's too light. The more careful your attention, the more sensitive you are and the more you start to see here. You also try to be attentive to the mind. Pay attention to what kind of breathing really helps the mind to settle down, what kind of breathing doesn't. Once you notice that, you can make changes. In other words, be observant. Watch carefully what's happening, and make adjustments. The more sensitive you are to what's going on, the more you're going to see, and at the same time, the more the mind will be willing to settle down. The fourth base of success is vimamsa, the one that's most difficult to translate. It covers the mind's ability to discern, its ability to be ingenious, in other words, all the qualities of active intelligence. If you see that something is not working in your meditation, use your imagination to figure out another approach that'll get better results. You can make the breath deeper, you can make it more shallow, you can make it come in and out different spots in the body. There's a lot to play around with here. Sometimes you have to use auxiliary meditation topics to help you. If you're having a problem with anger, work on goodwill and equanimity. There are meditation topics that help foster those qualities. If you're having a problem with lust and desire, contemplate the body in terms of its parts. Notice that when you're attracted to a body, it's not the whole body you're attracted to. It's only certain parts. If you took the whole body into your mind, inside and out, you'd find it really difficult to get attracted to it. If you're feeling lazy, you can start thinking about death. As I said earlier, you have no idea how much longer you're going to live. The only thing that's for sure is that you've got this opportunity right now, so take advantage of it. These are ways of thinking that get the mind directed back to its work. They're ways of using your powers of intelligence, your powers of ingenuity, to see what works to bring the mind to the present moment. Once you've got it there, you can focus on the breath again. Treat the breath as home base, and other topics simply as means of bringing you home when you've wandered off course. When you've got all these qualities together, your desire to meditate, your persistence, intentness, and your powers of ingenuity and intelligence, you find that the meditation grows, it develops. It starts showing results. Notice that desire does have a role in this. Sometimes people say that when you meditate you shouldn't have any desires, you should just be in the present moment, allowing whatever comes up to come, without any idea of progress at all. The Buddha never taught meditation that way. At all. The whole point of the practice is that it is a path, it goes someplace. That someplace is right here into the present moment, but there is progress in terms of what you see, develop, and abandon here in the present moment. And desire does play a role in that seeing, developing, and abandoning, as do all the other qualities. Intentness, persistence, ingenuity, the mind's ability to see what works and what doesn't work. It's simply a matter of learning how to use these mental qualities in a way that's helpful. Like desire. We've all had the experience of focusing on the goals we want in our meditation, and then discovering that our desire gets in the way. Well, the solution is not to drop the desire, it's to learn how to focus the desire in a way that's more useful. Focus on the causes that are going to get you there. Think of yourself as driving to a mountain on the horizon. If you spend all your time focusing on the mountain, you're going to drive off the road. So what do? You don't give up your desire to go to the mountain. You stay focused on the road. Every now and then you glance up to make sure that you're headed in the direction of the mountain, and that the mountain hasn't appeared in your rear-view mirror. But your main focus should be on what you're doing right now. Once you focus your desire here, make your desire more mindful, more alert, not in a general sense, but more precisely mindful right now, more precisely alert right now. And then the next moment, and then the next. Try to focus your desire on making the practice continuous. As I said, the problem is not getting in position, it's staying in position. That's what you've got to work with here. And you do that by being mindful of the breath, alert to the breath, more continually. Once you focus your desire properly, it becomes an aid to the meditation and not an obstacle. The same goes for the other qualities. Sometimes your effort can push so hard that it gets in the way of any kind of progress. So step back. Then it doesn't become a matter of not pushing, you just learn where to push, what things to push, what things to let be. In other words, you take these 4 bases for success and refine them. You learn through experience how to master them as aids to the meditation. Sometimes ingenuity, or thinking processes, can get carried away as you get too abstract in analyzing things. When that happens, step back and be ingenious about what you're doing right now. Analyze what you're doing right now, what the results are. Don't go beyond what's happening right now, what you're doing right now. That way these qualities become focused, they become a part of the meditation. They help your meditation succeed. Ordinarily we don't like to think in terms of success in meditation. There's so much pressure to succeed in the material area that we don't want to hear about standards for success in the area of the Dhamma. But if you're serious about putting an end to suffering, the issue of success is something you can't avoid. When you approach the meditation skillfully, you get results. Your efforts have succeeded. They're actually accomplished something. That's the whole point. So if you find that things aren't working in the meditation, it's because one of these qualities isn't properly focused. Either your desire to be with the breath is flagging, or you're not being as consistently persistent, breath after breath after breath, or you're not really paying attention, you're just going through the motions, or you're not using your analytical powers to see what's wrong, what could be changed if something has to be changed, or see where you're trying to push change too much. Use your powers of analysis to watch over all four of these qualities to see what's unbalanced, what's unfocused, and then figure out how to put things into shape. Once you've got these qualities working together on the meditation, there will have to be progress. There are no two ways about it. In Thailand, they like to take these qualities as a guide to how you progress in anything, how you succeed in anything. To succeed in school, to succeed in business, you need a desire to succeed, you need to be persistent, to be intent, to use your powers of analysis and ingenuity. If you apply those qualities to any task, you're sure to succeed. And what do you succeed in here? You succeed in putting an end to the suffering you've been causing yourself unnecessarily. You succeed in realizing the deathless. And you do it by developing more alertness, developing more mindfulness. You do it with this simple process of focusing on the breath, being sensitive to the breath, exploring the way the breath is moving in the present moment. All the good things in the mind build on this. This is the end of this episode. We will seeing you on our next episode. In accordance with the Buddha's guidance, we stress the significance of disseminating wisdom extensively. Today, we've converted this extensive 1,000-page book into an easily accessible audio format. It's now your turn to contribute to this noble cause. By subscribing, liking, and sharing this content, you actively participate in the spread of these teachings for the benefit of others. Together, we uphold the tradition of sharing knowledge and mindfulness for the greater good of humanity. Join us in this endeavor, and collectively, we can bring about a profound impact in the lives of many.